Well, good evening, everyone. Let's get started. Begin with item 1, call to order. I call the May 10th, 2022 regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order at 7 p.m. We'll begin with a roll call. Commissioner Christensen is excused, as is Commissioner Gay. Commissioner Seavey, present. Commissioner Michelson,
Present.
Commissioner Smith,
Present.
Commissioner Barrow. I saw you talk, but you may be muted, Commissioner Barrow. Still muted, but I acknowledge your presence. Commissioner Homan.
Present.
Okay, let the record reflect that a quorum is present for the meeting. Item 1B, approval of the agenda. Director Justice, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Barrow has moved to approve the agenda, and Commissioner Michelson has seconded the motion.
No, Commissioner Holman seconded.
Oh, excuse me. Commissioner Homan has seconded the motion. We'll now move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
and Commissioner Homan.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Item 2 is the public comment period. Residents may address the Planning and Zoning Commission to comment on issues, problems, or successes on topics that do not appear elsewhere on the agenda. Audience members will be given an opportunity to comment on agenda items as they come up. Speakers must register with the village staff prior to the beginning of the meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Kiko, do we have any members of the public signed up to speak?
There's nobody signed up to speak and there's nobody else in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Kiko. Well, I would normally say use the raise the hand feature to speak, but hearing that we don't have an audience, that we'll just move forward. Item 3 is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Item A is approval of the minutes from the April 12th, 2022 regular meeting. Are there any corrections or comments from the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Michelson, go ahead, please.
I'm moving for approval of the April meeting.
Okay,
I'll
The
second.
agenda- The minutes for the April meeting. Sorry, I'll try to get my words straight.
I'll second that.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Michelson has moved to approve the minutes. And Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. Going through a roll call vote. Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Homan.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Item 4 is public hearings and applications. Item 4A is variance 22-04, a request by KB&P Green Valley LLC for a variance from 9.2.7 E1. The minimum lot area shall be 1 acre, 43,560 square feet, to allow for a lot of approximately 0.5 acres in the A1 zone in the North Rio Grande character area. The property is located at 1118 Green Valley Road Northwest and is legally known as certain tracts of land known and described as tracts 202C3A1B and 202C3B1 as shown on map 29 of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, projected section 20, township 11 north, range 3 east, NMPM, Los Ranchos de Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, New Mexico. The property contains 0.5 acres more or less. Are there any commissioners who will recuse themselves from this item? Okay, hearing none. Attorney Winter, would you please swear in Director Tiffany Justice?
Tiffany, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Justice, may we have the planning report?
Certainly. So the applicant in this case is requesting a variance for a non-conforming vacant lot about half of an acre in the A1 zone, which is usually 1 acre. So this property is an MRGC tract, and our code does not allow issuance of a building permit on a vacant MRGC tract without them replatting their property. They're not necessarily subdividing their property, they're just redoing the lot lines and filing it with Bernalillo County in order to make sure that this is now a lot of record. Because this property is zoned A1, which is typically 1 acre, and they have less than an acre, they are required by code to get a variance prior to platting, since they don't meet the minimum area requirement. So the surrounding land uses are all zoned A1 in the North Rio Grande character area. And as for the analysis, there's several points for the variance that the applicant needs to meet, and they do. The first is regarding section 9.2.25 E7A1. Variance is and is not in conformance with the goals and policies of the village master plan. By nature, all variances are contrary to the master plan in terms of sections where it says to enforce our ordinances. However, this application is in conformance with the master plan in the residential development section. In accordance with section 9.2.25 E7A2, variance is not contrary to public interest. There are other properties in the A1 zone that don't meet the area requirements for the A1 zone, and this lot is consistent with those non-conforming lots. In addition to the proposed use, the property would be consistent with its agricultural and residential zoning, and smaller irregularly shaped MRGC tracts are not uncommon in the North Valley. Village did receive comments in favor and in opposition prior to publishing of the meeting packet. In accordance with section 9.2.25 E7A3, variance does meet 2 hardship criteria, number 4 and 5. Number 4, that circumstances have created a condition under which no reasonable use can be made of the land without a requested variance. Per our MRGCD sections of our code, section 9.4.3b, the applicant cannot build any structure on the property without first replatting the property. And since they were less than 1 acre, they have to be granted a variance in order to be replatted. This property has existed at its current acreage as an MRGCD tract since the 1940s, prior to the adoption of our MRGCD ordinance in 2016. And as for number 5, that other relevant factors exist that indicate that granting of the variance is substantially justifiable. This application does meet the intent and purpose of our master plan and zone code, and is also subject to, again, the MRGCD tract section that requires them to create their lot of record. The applicant intends to improve the property with a single-family residence and has performed environmental cleanup and abatement of the existing site. And this application is in conformance with section 9.2.25 E7 C1 through 6, that this does not affect the zoning of the property since the proposed use is still residential. Financial gain or loss is not a deciding factor. This variance differs only enough to relieve that alleged hardship. The alleged hardship is not self-imposed by the property owner, since this is a requirement imposed by the village under section 9.4.3b. No prior application for a variance has been submitted on this property in the past 6 months, and this variance does not set precedence since the basis for its approval is meeting hardship criteria number 4 and 5 and being subject to our MRGCD tract section. With that, the department recommends approval of the 22-04 for a variance from section 9.2.7 E1. The minimum lot area shall be 1 acre to allow for a lot of approximately 0.5 acres in the A1 zone in the North Rio Grande character area with the following conditions and findings. The condition that the variance is for the existing lot of approximately half an acre. And the findings that the variance request meets the requirements of section 9.2.25 E7A1, 2, and 3, B4 and 5, and C1 through 6. And public notice requirements have been met. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director Justice. Are there any questions from the commission for the director? I do have one. Reading a couple of these letters of, I don't want to call it opposition, but concern about the being able to bring water in from the acequia to their lots, as there's an easement, well, an alleged easement that allows water to get to the lots west of this property. In the site plan and in the documentation, I did not notice an easement per se, but I just was wondering if you had any further information on that, Director Justice.
Yes, so Commissioner Seavey, one of the main reasons why we like having plats platted and recorded with Bernalillo County instead of being MRGCD tracts is because MRGCD tracts do not necessarily show easements on properties. So there may be a paper easement recorded with Bernalillo County that we don't have on file, But at this point, we don't have any record of there being an easement or not. However, based on conversations with the person who submitted the comments, there is a irrigation ditch along the south side of properties along that road that is maintained, and I believe is maintained and owned through an easement of some kind.
Okay, thank you. And it doesn't look like the applicant's here, but we can ask them if they do show up. Any other questions from the commission at this point? Okay. Kiko, it does not look like the applicant is here, but could you confirm that for us?
There is nobody logged in at this time.
Okay, well, I guess procedurally we'll move on. That would also mean that there's nobody present to speak in favor of the application. And that also means that there's no one present to speak in opposition of the application. And the applicant will not be responding to these comments since they're not present. That being said, are there any further comments from the commission before I close the floor? Yes, Commissioner Homan.
I would just like to note that it appears, at least in my analysis, that this really is just an improved home being posted on this property. So overall, it should be an improvement to the village and neighborhood. Is that correct, Tiffany?
Commissioner Homan, commissioners, yes, this essentially this is a residential lot and they want the ability to develop it as a residential lot.
Okay, and just also out of curiosity, did they come to the village and announce what their intent was prior to the demolition?
No, they did not. So typically, not always to our preference, but sometimes contractors will demolish things before they submit for building permits as a way to move through the process faster. And so, but the issue with MRGCD tracks is once you demolish, you've created a situation where you now have a vacant lot. And if that happens before we issue the building permit, you cannot get a building permit. That's what happened in this case. So the contractor moved ahead as they typically do, just without this knowledge.
Thank you for that clarification. That is what I thought.
Any other comments at this point from the commission? I'm going to go ahead and just technically close the floor, but I'll ask again if there's any comments, please go ahead. Well, hearing no comments, seeing that the 2 hardship criteria are met, I do feel inclined to move forward with this, but I do want to ensure that water access is ensured to these properties and to these property owners who spoke up. And I'm not sure if this is the proper time to include a condition that would say that an easement would be required to carry water, but that's something that we may want to consider is adding that condition. And seeing that this may be addressed in platting, at least that comment would carry forward and hopefully ensure that. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Director Justice or Commissioner Homan.
Chairman, I would think that we haven't given notice to that element as far as this decision goes. In providing ingress and egress for basically anybody in the neighborhood that wants to come across their property, I don't believe is appropriate. I mean, from the standpoint of fencing your yard, guarding your neighbors and guests from perhaps a family pet and everything would come into, could be a very severe issue. So I don't think that's appropriate for us to add, but that is my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, that does make sense. And I know that there is, and I don't have this language in front of me, but I do believe there is some language in, is it the A1 ordinance that talks about preserving, water access to lots that would otherwise be cut off?
So Commissioner CV, commissioners, that language is in the AC zone only. However, I guess in this case, for water access, on the one hand, it is the property owner's right to do what they will with their property, whether to vacate easements or maintain easements. However, in the case of a continuous water easement, that might be something that cannot or should not be vacated without the consent of everybody else who's involved.
I see.
But unfortunately, we don't know the exact details of that easement language, so we don't know whether or not it requires an open ditch, a closed ditch, or just access alone.
Okay, well, it seems like it's slightly out of our purview. So unfortunately, I don't know if we can address it in terms of the conditions. I agree with Commissioner Homan there. Another item was brought up that I also think is probably outside of our scope tonight, and that was the blocking of the ditch by a couple gates that runs north-south. Two of the concerned residents brought this up. As you progress south on the Pueblo Acequia Cross Green Valley Road, you run into a barrier and you can't continue south towards Village Hall. And I believe that is what they're talking about. I completely hear that, but I also, that's probably not a part of the scope of this discussion. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because that is something that, two residents did bring up. Okay, well, if there's no further discussion, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve V22-04 as with the conditions put on by by Tiffany Justice.
Mr. Chairman, do we also need to include the findings in this? Or just reference to the planner's report is enough?
I don't think we need to, but that is a good procedural question that we should seek confirmation on. Director Justice?
So Commissioner Homan, Commissioner Seavey, Commissioners, you don't need to include the findings specifically. I include those in our notice of decision as a summary of the analysis for the decision. As long as we get a motion to approve with conditions or deny or approve, the findings will reflect that.
Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, I will second Commissioner Michelson's motion.
Okay, so Commissioner Michelson has moved to approve variance 22-04 with the conditions as listed, and Commissioner Homan has seconded the motion. Is there any final discussion on the motion before we move on to a roll call vote? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Homan.
Yes,
The motion carries unanimously. Let the record show that the public hearing item 4A, the request by KB&P Green Valley Limited Liability Corporation for a variance is formally closed. We'll now move on to item 5, old business. There is no old business. Item 6, new business. There is no new business. Item 7, reports. Director Justice, may we have the Planning Department report?
Yes, so just as an update, we may return to in-person in July. However, we will be remaining online in June, just to let you all know ahead of time. For the Planning and Zoning Department, we have a new administrative assistant. Her name is Michelle Austin. She's been getting up to speed on the position of the assistant and is handling day-to-day building permit, parcel permit, sign permit, and business license applications, and we're excited to bring her on board. Thomas Sanchez continues to patrol the village and is working with property owners to bring their properties into compliance. We did recently take a case to court that was dismissed. Helen Ganal has been working on revisions to our transit and parking space number and dimension requirements, which won't be on the May agenda for the Board of Trustees, but we are anticipating bringing that to the board in June. Her last day with us was May 9th. and we greatly appreciate the help that she provided while she was with us for the past 5 months. I've been revising the public hearing zoning applications. I'm noting now that there are no changes accepted after somebody submits their application. And I've also created a temporary noise permit application form. At the May board meeting, we'll be presenting an ordinance repealing the alarm device ordinance, and an ordinance revising the noise ordinance will be presented for advertisement. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director Justice. Any questions from the commission? Okay, we'll now move on to item 8, which is the commissioners' informal discussion. Are there any reports or information that any of the commissioners would like to share? Yes, Commissioner Homan, please.
It's more of a question. Director Justice, could you give us any kind of an update on the clearing of weeds and debris, especially from any of the acequia trails and any of the thoroughfares and roadways? I mean, right now with it being weed season, despite the fact that we're so dry, I think it is important that we know what the situation is and what's being done so that if there is a fire, there isn't more debris that's fueling that fire.
Right. So Commissioner Homan, commissioners, Thomas continues to send out annual weed violation letters. Essentially, when properties have too many weeds, we'll send them notices to trim them. So he continues to do that. There are some properties that always kind of have some situations. For public right-of-way, our public facilities crew is working to make sure that all of our roads and parks and facilities are all clean. And we did recently do a couple things. First, Keen Heinzelman's crew has been working on clearing some brush on the Paseo del Norte right-of-way area. It's not the bike path area. It's in, but it is in that area. So he is working specifically on some of those areas to make sure to clear the brush. And we did work with some student volunteers from St. Pius High School to clear the ditches at the Agri-Nature Center. So we are working to make sure that in the event there is a fire, we're not creating more of a problem by neglect.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we'll now move on to item 9, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Michelson has moved to adjourn and Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. The meeting for May 10th, 2022 is adjourned at 7:23 p.m. Going for a world record.
Great month, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Matt, Drew.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.